Should I start?
Sure.
Welcome to Design Notes with Liam Spradlin and myself.
All right, welcome to Design Notes. This is a new podcast that I'm starting in case this is the first episode you're hearing. It might very well be the first episode ever. Basically, the goal here is to sit down with designers and developers and talk about some of the projects that they've worked on, go over some of the notable points for what they worked on, what stands out in their mind, and have some discussion around that. So this episode is with Francisco Franco, and it's all about focus.
Of course, it's about focus.
Of course.
Hello.
If it's us, how could it be about anything else?
So, what are you going to ask me about today?
So I guess the first kind of topic that I want to talk about is basically, I guess the whole episode is about going kind of from concept to completion with an app. So like we did with Focus, starting from the ground up. And I guess that starts with, from my perspective, presenting the initial designs. So having the idea and then giving it to you, the developer, and what your approach is like when that happens.
For me, it was a different thing, I guess, because I always had to think about everything on an app, from design to the implementation itself. So this time it was a welcome change. And like I said before, it's like one less element to think about. How I could just focus on one aspect to programming. Of course, I told you a bunch of times if I like this, I like that, or should we do this?
Yeah.
Instead of that, but
or like this design that you gave me is insane and it will never work.
Well, that happened a couple times.
Yeah.
Those crazy animations that no other user have seen, and I was like blown out. No, just stop there.
Yeah. So, and I guess that's something for me that I've always believed that good design happens within constraints. So for me, working on mobile interfaces, the constraints are basically what can be feasibly implemented. Like once you get past the actual like UI structure and all of the elements that make it up, what kinds of things, like some of the animations that I proposed, knowing better what things are possible and what aren't. So
But that's your job too, right?
Right.
Knowing beforehand what it's possible or not.
Definitely. And I think that every designer working on mobile interfaces should know that stuff, which, I've got a long way to go. I've familiarized myself with the design support library and everything, but that's only a piece of the puzzle.
I'll tell you a secret. I have no idea how the animations API work, and I know like 1% of the whole API. So we are almost at the same level. It's a secret, don't tell anyone.
Of course.
And I hate the API. It's so hard to do a simple animation. Well, simple animation like rotate or scale or translate, and that's like one line of code. But if you want to start doing crazy stuff like the ones you presented to me a couple times, well, it's not the same thing. You actually have to know the API and how those things link together, and be confident to waste a couple hours.
Yeah. I think sometime I should release a post with some of the cutting room material from Focus. Some of those crazy drawer animations and everything.
Yeah, I can show you some code, I think.
But yeah, I know that working on some other apps too, we ran into issues, especially with shared elements, complicating things. Of course, everybody loves shared elements. Everybody wants that Play Store magic.
Yeah, talking about shared elements, it was introduced on Lollipop. It was like a major thing, but it has some complications, especially when you, at least for me, maybe I'm saying something wrong, but in my experience, in case of Focus, we had the main screen when you see all the thumbnails, and that's a fragment inside an activity. And I wanted to share the thumbnail element to the view pager. That's the next, like a full image it's inside a view pager, and that view pager is an activity. It's in an activity, and inside that activity, the view pager loads a fragment for each one of the pictures. And I had very hard time implementing how the thumbnail view gets translated to another activity, and then from the activity to the actual fragment, and having that whole path, in this case making the view bigger, like the expand. That's the most common on galleries, that you actually even see that on iOS. I couldn't figure it out. I wasted a couple of days on that, so at the end I just ended up doing the whole animation manually by following a video from Chet Haas. So right now it looks like it's a shared element, but it's actually everything's done manually, and it's retro compatible until, well, we have APA 16, so it's Jelly Bean. So in the end, we made it happen, I think, and that was a major challenge for me, and that's it, I think.
Yeah, so I guess
it's not easy.
That brings up one question that I've always wanted to talk about, which is kind of like, for these design elements that are a big challenge to actually implement, how do you know when something is just not going to work?
That's a very interesting question. Are we talking about just the animations, or like a normal layout and with views, or if you're talking about just animations, I can see them right away because I know how the code is structured. So I know how the animation would work in theory and how it doesn't fit in the layout that we have. But if we are talking just about the layout itself and how the views are positioned here or there, I think everything you proposed to me in terms of how stuff is positioned, I think everything went in. I think I didn't have any hard time, because building layout, it's not hard at all. So because I've done that before so many times, but it takes time to practice and know how the different parents work between each other. For example, if you use too many relative layouts, you will have performance issues. But if you can use one relative layout instead of two linear layouts, it's a win. Or using frame layouts, because they are cheap to use, how they don't position views anywhere. So that stuff just comes from experience. But yeah, I think just animations, I actually just see them right away on your proposals, and right away I know, okay, this is very hard.
Yeah.
Or just don't bother me, I won't do this.
Go back to the drawing board.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess some things that jump out as impossible right away might change over time, or like find ways around it, or just as you become more familiar with whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah, but what's your process in coming up with those animations and those layouts from the beginning? Like I ask you, we need the screens for this. How do you get an idea so fast? Most of the times, just come up with something like 1 second after I ask you for it, and how do you go from there and actually give him the sketch?
I think a lot of it is recognizing patterns, so like user behavior patterns or what they might expect, and then it depends, whatever screen you're working on, or if you're working on a whole feature, just break it down into smaller pieces. So break the feature down into a flow of how users would expect to accomplish whatever task it is that feature is accomplishing for them. Break the flow down into individual screens and break those down into elements, and then put them all together and see what it ends up looking like. And if it turns out ugly, then you start again. And you just keep going like that over and over.
and then you say to me, I don't like how this is going, I'm going to
Right.
start again. And then 1 minute after, I'm done, here's another.
I'll tell you, oh, I have an idea, and
Come
then
on.
5 minutes later I'll say it turned out bad. Sorry.
That's like 99.9% of the times.
But then you get the 0.1% where it turns out good.
Yeah, but that's very rare.
So. So yeah, I guess another thing is theming. That's something that I know we want to talk about, because that's something that we've had a lot of requests for in Focus. So I'm going to ask, like, what's your perspective on theming, both from the perspective of, like, is it worth it, and from an implementation standpoint of, like, how difficult it is versus the payoff that you get from implementing that.
Well, I'm not a big fan of theming just because of the theme, just because it's cool, because we can have themes. Not just because you can have something doesn't mean you have to implement it. And I know, since material design apps are pretty similar, at least there's not as much differentiation as it was before. But for once, that's a good change, because before all the apps were kind of ugly and there was no consistency. And if you just look on other mobile operating systems like iOS or Windows Phone, there was some kind of consistency between the UIs, and Android was lagging behind that perspective. So starting from this point, I think at least a light and a dark theme, it's needed, because I like light, you like dark, and maybe my eyes react better with a dark theme just because I have some condition, or my eyes are like green eyes and I prefer a darker theme. At least we cover both spectrums, I think, with just those two themes. But the actual experience, it's the same. There's consistency. If you start going crazy with different colors and different icons, and no, that's a no. We had users asking us for like a red theme, or almost like a theme chooser. Come on. Even if you'd like that, that makes no sense, because there's no product brand in that. At least I think from the beginning in Focus, we had a clear path of how our UI would look and what colors we would use. So adding a dark theme was nothing but an extension of our brand. So I think that's my opinion. But other than that, I'm not a big fan of themes. I hate those crazy themes you see on Google Plus, people sharing screenshots of crazy icons and colors, and I just stop that. That looks like, well, you know what I'm thinking about. You were saying?
Yeah, I think it also depends on the app. So I think your point about pre-material design, for instance, is a really good one, because before material design, there was no real like exhaustive guideline for designing for Android. Not an official one from Google anyway. They had some general guidance on icons and toolbars and everything.
Toolbars?
But
no.
Action bar.
No, that came later. I think up to Gingerbread, you didn't have any action bar.
Oh, right. Yeah, and when action bars and everything happened was ice cream sandwich.
I think it started with Honeycomb. Someone will correct us if we are wrong, but I think it started with Honeycomb. But since Honeycomb was like a fiasco, so let's say ice cream sandwich.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there was a lot less consistency among apps. Users couldn't rely on understanding basic paradigms of the interface, I guess. So in that sense, customization could be really helpful, because people could make it feel like other apps that they like to use, even if the interface wasn't really up to par. So material design, I don't necessarily think that any two apps look the same just because they implement material design, but I think that it is exhaustive enough in the guidelines to form an underlying thread of good design and good experience. So the need for theming is kind of reduced. But that said, it also depends on the product. So like Today Calendar, for instance, we have 2 palettes that you can choose from for primary and accent colors, but those don't really affect key elements to the experience. So for instance, on the split view, you can theme the primary color, which affects the canvas, and the accent color, which is the floating action button. But we limited the palette, and those are 2 elements that don't really shape the experience, whereas I feel like in a gallery app, for instance, the canvas is one of only 2 things that you have in the interface, the canvas and the actual images. So I think it's a bigger deal to theme something like that. But I do agree, I'm willing to grant dark mode themes because I think that those make sense in a lot of cases, especially it seemed like for a while that Marshmallow might enable some kind of switching between light and dark at the system level so that apps would obey that if the user chose to go into dark mode, which was a cool feature. So if it's a platform thing, I think dark mode makes sense.
Well, yes, but even it's a big if there was some like system callback that said like, hey, I'm in dark mode right now, Android. Imagine Focus would implement that or listen to that callback. It would implement the dark theme, in this case from the app compat, but then again all your icons were still the same ones that you used on a white theme, so you still had to create the new icons, the new text colors.
That's true.
So all of that, and I think I haven't answered the question up to the full extent. It's not hard to have different themes, but it's not easy because the whole styles architecture, it's not very user friendly for the developer. Just in my opinion, I think it's kind of confusing. I've done it a couple of times, so I know at least the basic, but you still have to build the drawables and pay attention to different colors, and that's the hardest part. In this case on Focus, you did all the icons for me, so it was less job for me, less work for me, but I still had to build all the attributes, the ifs and the else's on the code, and all of that. It's kind of cumbersome, but I think the payoff is good. At least in our case, we sell the dark theme, the premium bundle, so it's added value. So yes, in this case it makes sense.
Yeah, so there's the added asset cost and coding cost of implementing the themes, but then there's also the file size cost, at least until vector drawable compat is adopted. Yes. Because you essentially have multiple. I guess you would end up, if you were supporting MDPI through XXX HDPI, then you would end up with 10 versions of every icon if you were doing one theme.
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming. Let me see, in our case, I don't know, we have like 100 different drawables just for one theme, and then for the other, I think they share like 30 different icons. Right. So they're mostly small ones, but yeah, like you said, if you support down to MDPI like we had before, but that's gone under the roof, it's a pretty hefty size.
Right. Which I, for one, cannot wait until vector drawable compat is in the wild.
Yeah, I hope so. But even for even for you, the designer, if you support all the different sizes, it's a lot of work to resize everything.
Right. And then, well, so I use Illustrator, and I have basically templates for different DP values. So each template would have like 5 artboards, and I would just resize it to those. However, I've remade tons of icons this way because it turns out that if your artboard is positioned, well, first of all, it's possible in Illustrator to position your artboard on a decimal pixel, which is not a full pixel. So then when you export, it adds another pixel to the artboard to make up for that. And you end up with improperly sized assets, and it's a huge pain. But anyway, Yeah, vectors are great because I just export one SVG file and convert it to XML, and then that supports every screen
I cannot wait for
ever,
that.
as far as I know.
Well, they promised the compat like last year or something, but I don't know. Maybe
I think it was a DroidCon that I heard that it is actually coming soon.
It's always coming soon. Everything from Google is coming soon. Everything. They announce Nexus and then it's coming soon, and then 10 months later they come to my country. So everything is like that on Google. I love Google, guys. I love Google, but it's always soon for them.
I remain optimistic. There's a library called Vector Compat that you can use now that I think goes back to API 16 or maybe even 14, but that's, it's the difference of like relying on a third-party library versus...
Well, we rely on a lot of different libraries for focus.
That's true.
But I think in this specific case, dealing with drawables and images and different display sizes and densities, I'm not sure it's a good idea to rely. Even the developer might be like a Google developer. I don't care. I think it must come from them. It will have bugs like every library that they release, but I think it's a good way to prevent weird stuff.
Yeah, it's it has Google's name attached to it, so
yes,
hopefully they'll keep up with it.
At least it's them to blame, so that's
right.
Something good to do.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I guess moving on from that, more kind of design plus development stuff. I guess what are you most proud of in Focus in terms of like what was your best developing accomplishment? I can think of a few that I was really excited about, but they might not be the same ones that you're excited about.
I'll let you say first because I haven't thought about this, because I see everything has a big map of code. So I'll hear your first.
Okay. I think from the design perspective, probably my favorite thing is the tag paradigm that we worked out, just because the way that they appear throughout the interface is familiar, but not always the same. I feel like it's dynamic. They animate from the main screen to inside a collection, and you see them in the tag selector inside of an individual picture, and they're not, they're circles rather than ovals, but you still know what they are. Just the way that they behave. And the fact that they appear in the drawer. I love the drawer.
Oh, yes.
Because
definitely. Yes.
It feels platform aware, but it's non-standard. So I think it's non-standard in a way that is very positive.
Yes, I have to agree with you. The nav drawer, it was probably your best design paradigm for Focus, because it's, like you said, it's so different. It makes sense. And I haven't seen any drawer, they all look the same. So I haven't seen any drawer with that kind of look. And you can easily identify everything just by looking at the drawer, or looking at the main screen, or looking inside a collection or a tag, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, everything is consistent from one end to another, but it's a differentiator.
Yeah, and I think from my end, the idea was that the drawer should always hold kind of like the main destinations for the app. And since the whole tagging system is kind of our thing, like that's what Focus does, like that's its main feature, I guess.
Yes.
That it made sense that those collections would be the destination.
For sure. I think I'll tell a secret right now. The first idea for the tag system, I completely copied the Mac OS X tagging system, and I've never used it even once, but they always looked fine on my screen, seeing all the different dots and the possibility of grouping files together instead of creating a folder, because creating folders just suck. I hate having to create a directory to store my files. So, but then again, I haven't used the tag system just because I think I'm kind of lazy. But it was the perfect opportunity to use this kind of organization to an app. And at least speaking for me, I always hated every gallery because it's always hard to manage your pictures. And this time we allow for easy organization without actually moving the files. And I think that's what I'm most proud of on the actual code itself. My code isn't pretty, but
nobody has to see that.
Yes, nobody has to see that. Yeah. It's always evolving, but everything just going straight as a tag. So each picture can be tagged, and it all makes sense. I don't know how to explain it to you because I always see code, but the whole architecture I'm kind of proud of.
And I think it's cool that all of this kind of structure is accomplished kind of on the surface. Like there's no huge underlying infrastructure of folders or any
exactly
like big underlying blocks. The tags are written to metadata invisibly. You don't see it happening.
Yes.
The tags appear as their own discrete categories, but they're not they're not backed by folders in your file system that you'll have to clean up later.
Yes, that's a drag. Nobody wants another system to put your picture in a folder, and that's just rudimentary. And users just keep asking us for ability to move pictures. I don't know if we are going to talk about that later. Are we?
We can, sure. I think it just goes to show the point that so testing is important because I feel like a lot of this stuff comes up in testing, but then once the app is actually out in the wild, learning about things that users expect or want that you had no idea about, So like specific to the product, there are always things that come up that the people working on the product probably had no clue about, like moving photos between folders. I call myself the most boring user in the world, but I
am. I have that. No. Sorry, I have the title. No, go away.
We're competing for the title.
Yes. Yes, I have to agree with you on that. I think users are the best, can be the best and can be the worst. Even us as a user on different apps, we can be on the good side and bad side. We can love the app or just say it sucks. So we have the power. So, and we give the money, and our users pay us the app, and even then, having the power, sometimes it's hard to manage how we deal. I think, speaking for myself, deal with user requests, because as you said, they always have a different side of the product than from us, because they haven't built it, and we grow accustomed to the app itself, and we don't see different patterns or some usability patterns that other users see, because we're just used to it, and that's normal. And that's why I love users. They give you everything, and it's been a big challenge for me since I've started with Android. It's which features should I implement?
Right.
Which ones should I not? It's a big challenge, but that's part of life, and I just have to deal with it as a developer. I'm not sure that you as a designer feel the same, maybe in a different way, but that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, there's definitely an ongoing discussion in terms of like product and features, an ongoing discussion between users and developers. As far as like what developers envision for their product, how requests fit into that, whether some requests are even possible in the first place. So from the design side, I know that I've received feedback about like, why haven't you done X, Y, and Z? Like it should be simple to add A, B, or C. And for me, I'm like, personally, I have no idea how to begin adding A, B, or C. And I've been told that it's very difficult. So I try to kind of escape that. But yeah, I think there definitely is ongoing discussion on both sides, which I think is ultimately a good thing.
Did you have an example of something that you've read from our users that you were like, come on, that makes no sense at all? Do you remember anything?
Well, I don't want to call out any of our users, certainly. I'm sure there's something. I know that, I mean, just even moving between folders is something that really surprised me.
Yes.
Not that I want to like dismiss it and say, no, nobody does that, but it was a surprising request because it was just something that I never considered.
Well, I dismissed it always. Every time somebody asked us for that, I always said that makes no sense in our app paradigm, because if we build a tag system, it's to save you from the trouble of moving stuff from one end to another.
That's true. So I guess that's part of it too, is communicating the product vision and why, like why you make certain decisions, both from design and development standpoints, and why that's ultimately beneficial, even if sometimes it doesn't look like it immediately.
That's a hard question. I think most of the times I just go with my gut, because I don't want to sound like someone that knows everything about the platform or Android or whatever. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a lot of users, either from previous projects or not. And from the starting point, I mostly know what makes sense and what doesn't, at least for implementation itself. So that's like my first defense when there's a feature. Okay, that makes sense, or it doesn't. If it makes sense, then I start thinking, okay, how should we do this? And we talk about it, and then we come to the conclusion that, okay, after all, that doesn't make sense because this and that. But then there's the like 5% that actually makes sense, and you start doing it, and after all, there's a lot of code to program, and then your decision comes with the time you have for the actual version that you're going to ship. If you're going to ship it like 1 week, should we implement this right now? How much time should this take? I think if this task takes 1 day, just add like 5 on top of it, because then you have the bugs, and then you have to test, and then you find some obscure case of non-compatibility or some stupid crash or something that Google didn't expose to you on the actual implementation. It's exhausting. So
yeah.
So that's,
I think,
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think going with your gut is a good thing often, because if you have a concrete idea about the project that you're already intimate with, then you know it well, and you know what fits and what doesn't. But
yes,
the thing about requests like that and everything is, I don't know if you've heard that quote, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I think when you get a request that says like, won't it be easy to add this feature, it's kind of like that. The
answer is always no.
Essentially, you're a wizard, basically, and you're the one who makes this awesome stuff. But yeah, there is like the testing and unexpected bugs, and you kill 1 bug and it grows back as 2 bugs, and it goes on like that.
But then again, you're a wizard, Harry. So
yeah, exactly. So you can just cast your spell.
Yes, most users kind of think that we just can make things happen from thin air, and then implementing whatever just takes 1 hour on 1 line of code. Like, I saw a post today, someone, please add Dropbox, cloud support, Google Drive, Box. And I was like, my friend Christian has an app for that, and it took him like 3 or 4 months just to get the basic implementation. How do you think I'm going to add this stuff to focus and not ruin the whole experience?
There are also considerations about adding other services like that. So I know, for instance, Jack Underwood, who's working on Monospace, the note writing app, essentially had Drive integration, but something about the API limiting the number of requests that you were able to make essentially ruined the experience, and so he had to take it out before the actual launch. But just things like that you run into, which I guess kind of leads into the point of, that whole process of actually digging in and trying to implement things and then running into these issues and bugs and roadblocks gets us into how things compare between when you start the project and you have the original vision and the concepts and the idea of how you're going to implement it versus what you actually come out with as the result.
I think, speaking for me, I only started projects that beforehand I had a strong idea how it should look and on the end. So I never had an occasion where I think 100 and then I finish with 50. So it always,
sure. I think you finished with 100, but it might be a different 100 than the 100 that you started with.
Yes, I never had that happen. I always started with something and finished exactly. But that's because, speaking for me, that's how I am. Before I start something, and I make sure that everything just fits together, and I always did. And I think as a programmer, you just have to search a lot and you have to be sure that you can use the tools to achieve what you want to do before you start. If that doesn't fit together, just don't start it. So I think that probably is something that happens to you more than me. That you think about something on the beginning as a design process, and then you finish it, and it's different. I think it's more visual to you.
In some drastic cases, it's you start off at 100, and then once you're at 75, you realize that 100 was actually 60, and then you think of something better. And there's a lot of complex math that happens during that equation, but it's smaller things too. So, like the bottom toolbar in the picture viewer, for instance, that's gone through tons of changes so far, which isn't a bad thing. It's great as it is, but it's different, which is interesting.
Yeah, the first sketch that you did on the picture viewer, I actually used the palette to get the color from the pictures.
Yes, and there was a brief moment where things were themed with the palette color.
Yeah, we tried that and themed the status bar and the navigation bar with some darker, vibrant color of the image. And no one ever saw that.
Yeah, it just didn't work out. It wasn't a good idea. That was think you're at 100 and you get to 75 and you realize you were at 60.
But, in this case, but I'm glad it didn't go out because it didn't look that good.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
Not at all. But
it is interesting just to see that process, both from me realizing that a certain way of designing something will be better than the previous idea, and from the perspective of presenting an idea that doesn't end up working in development and then coming up with something else as a reaction to that.
Yeah, it's the developer's job to actually surprise you sometimes. I'm not sure I did it, but sometimes you present us something and you cannot implement it that way because of some reason. Then you have to just go around it and try to make you smile with something a little bit different and pray that you don't notice, but you always notice.
That's something else, like as a designer, just to know when you submit the design and everything and you get back like the first implementation, don't freak out.
Yes, it's always different. Like the I think on Focus that there's a specific layout, the tablet layout where you made some crazy sketches with the nav drawer and the circles on the left, and you wanted like the nav drawer to fade or something behind the circles. Like, come on, that's not possible.
I should really post a GIF of this animation so everybody that listens can see it, because it was. I still think it's a pretty cool animation, but it's one of those things that like we talked about it for probably 2 hours about different ways to like hack around with having like slivers of paper and like little things.
Yeah, that's the always hack. We are always hacking around.
even the tag selector, when you are choosing a color for your custom tag, that's totally a hack. But you know, nobody needs to know that. It can just be between us.
No, we can speak about that. You wanted the shapes to morph using.
I was talking about
into the check, right?
Yeah, I was talking about the color ripple, but that one's even more interesting. So
the color the reveal.
Yeah, so
it's not the ripple, it's the reveal.
I proposed this animation where we would use vector drawables for icons because I love vector drawables. And essentially, so like if you were tagging something under the pets tag, the paw print would transform into a check mark using this very fluid, amazing animation. But it turned out that you can only, well, as far as my understanding of it goes, which might not be far, but you can only animate between two shapes if they have the same number of segments and anchor points, which means that we could probably do it, but it would involve making like 30 individual check marks that were all different drawables for each thing, and then animating each of those vector drawables between each other.
And making a pause there, they had to be vector drawables, which were not...
which we're already not doing in the first place, so... It would be a whole other layer. But for instance, everybody knows the cool play to pause animation where the play icon turns into a pause button and vice versa. But when it transforms into the play icon, it's not actually one triangle, it's two triangles smushed together that came from the two rectangles. So those extra anchor points are still there, they're just on top of each other.
Yeah.
So that was something unexpected for me. One of a few unexpected animation complications that I introduced.
And then you wanted, after we decided we are not going to do that for the reasons you presented, you wanted some fade in, fade out animation. And I was like, that's not possible for this case because this, that, and that. And then you made me add a fake layer in between, so the
I was pretty proud of that idea, actually.
No, it was a good idea, but if anyone saw the code that I have there, not the actual code in Java, but the XML, the layout, I would be hanged because of how bad it is. Not the code is bad, but for performance, it's not that good because of the several layers is going up and down and faking and visibilities. But in the end, the users don't see it, so it was a I'll say I was just happy to get the toolbar elevation fading in as you scroll down on the main screen. Like that was enough. That was enough to make me happy. Yes, I remember that. Because I think users have no idea how hard it is to implement some, for example, just making the status bar transparent and the drawer going behind it. And just that alone, I think I wasted 2 days on that. Not just because it's hard, it's not hard as it is, but just getting the right configuration for that specific thing. It's just like climbing the Everest.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, at least before the material design support library came out, the way that Google was doing it was to apply a drawable to the top of the navigation drawer.
Yes.
that appeared like it was the status bar, but it actually wasn't.
Yes.
Which is a funny kind of trick.
Yes, it's a funny kind of trick, but it's awful. Then they showed us a different way to do it on the Google I/O 2014 app, where they used a different layout called Screen Frame Layout something. And I haven't looked at their code because Google's code, it's always a giant spider web. But yeah, it did the job, but before that you just have to figure that out. And then they released the design support library, and they had a navigation view built in, and the new app bar layout. So everything now it's easier. You just put that stuff on XML and add some flags, and it mostly works. But then again, you want to make the nav bar transparent because Google Photos does it, so we have to do it. That's a user quote. That's not possible with the layout we have, and everything just playing together. It's just like playing the Rubik cube. You can never get the right configuration for everything for some reason. Some things are just too hard because Google does it so hard.
Right. I know that before the design support library came out, I was trying to learn about XML layouts and hooking things up like that. So I made just a screen that had a toolbar, a sliding tab bar, and a navigation drawer. And it took me like 3 days to do that. And then once the design support library came out, it was like, I forget what it's called, but the tab bar is a thing, the toolbar is a thing, the navigation view is a thing. The fab, even the floating action button is just a thing that you put in, and it already has like
it's done
elevation
for you.
Translations. Yeah. When you press it, it elevates, and everything just happens, which is great. I want more of that.
I agree, but I think I'll tell a secret right now, or it was a secret. When Google released the first draft for the material design, there were no app compat, there were no code made for you, and I was working on the US at that time. I was helping a Portuguese startup. We were stationed on the Twitter building up in San Francisco, and in the last days I decided I wanted to rewrite my Franco Kernel app from scratch because I wanted to use the new material design stuff. But there was no code for anything. You just had to look at the specs and make everything yourself, like all the buttons, trying to mimic the buttons, trying to mimic the dialogues, all the positions, everything fitting together, the elevations. Well, I don't remember. No, it wasn't possible before the first preview. And then on the plane trip back to Portugal, it's like 10 hours from San Francisco to, I think, Amsterdam that time, 11 hours or something. I coded every single view myself for my app before the app compat existed, like dialogues, buttons, the navigation drawer, the text use. I spent 11 hours straight just trying to mimic everything. While my friend was sleeping, I was typing code, and I kind of crazy mode. But yeah, just building on this idea. A couple months later, the app compat was revealed, and I wanted to shoot myself. But then again, it was a nice exercise to learn new patterns and stuff. So yes, like you said, we are very spoiled for having everything just in force.
One thing that I would love to see, both for my own curiosity and because I think it would be helpful to developers, is if the design spec had links to developer documentation.
Yes.
For the things that they talk about, because I feel like
yes,
they want those two things to come together. So put them together, essentially.
You have no idea how many times I've thought that since they pushed the first draft from google.com/design. It's like heaven, made in heaven. It should be there like a example, but no, that doesn't happen.
And it's kind of like here's what this should look like, do it, versus here's what this should look like, here's how you do it, you know?
But that's just how Google works with Android. Just here's how it should look, or here's how it should present. Good luck. We'll give you a hug if you figure it out. Like this.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would change about the spec. Is nothing to do with the spec itself, just
the specs are. I think the specs are amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
They're extremely.
Yeah, extremely detailed. I don't know about you as a designer, but for me, I always get lost there. Not lost. I know where I am, but it's so good. The material is so good, so detailed.
Yeah, I probably visit every day, I think, just to look things up, like as I'm working for definitions, and it's really thoughtfully put together in terms of what information they give you and explaining why certain approaches are good.
Totally agree. Of course, every time you go there, you have to see the GIF whatever of that music app that they presented. It's always
haunting
there.
Us from it's
it's always there hunting us. And you, at least for me, I always think I'm going to build an app exactly like this. Then I start thinking, nah, too many animations. No.
Yeah. Do you think that's what Google thought too? A lot of people have been asking for that app.
Too many animations. No, too many animations. I think you cannot implement that.
I totally give them a pass on that, because they said during the talk, these are not our products, these are just ideas. So I'm totally okay that Play Music is not that app. But
nobody gave a crap about that, because everyone was like, their jaws were open looking at the material design. So their brain was just it was synchronized. It's a lock. Just lock on that. Oh wow, that's amazing. And everything they said after that, nobody cared.
Oh, definitely, because when they introduced it, I mean, it was hypnotizing. This was something that I don't think Google has really ever done anything like this before, in terms of coming up with their own aesthetic and then detailing it in such a precise, thoughtful way.
Yes,
and promoting it too.
It is. It's not just Android. It's the web. Well, we haven't seen much of that on the web, but even Android Police, the new website, has a couple elements like the elevations, the posts look like a big card, but overall we haven't seen much of that. But the web is so big,
and iOS as well in some cases.
Yes, it is.
I have seen some third-party apps with floating action buttons and elevations and stuff, which is cool, because I think Material is not like, it doesn't need to be platform specific, because there are ideas there that are just good ideas, period, regardless of what platform you're on.
Totally agree. I think material design on iOS, I have an iPhone, as you probably know. And
of course.
Of course.
Everybody knows now.
Everybody knows now. Yeah, and they hate me, but I don't care. Their the material design on their apps is just amazing. The animations are very fluid. You see the cards look awesome. Even the open, and I'm just using my iPhone right now. I'm clicking the overflow button on the Google app, and it has the same animation that Android M does when you click the overflow.
Right.
So it's the little touches. The Google Photos app has an animation that I showed you a couple weeks ago. You just press the fab, and you slide up, and it kind of reveals itself on you.
Just that is cool.
Yeah, it's the little touches.
It's an undiscoverable thing, but the fact that it's not, it's another way to perform the same action, so I think it's okay. But
yeah.
It's really clever. And I think something that's really amusing to me is in the Google app that they essentially have like a mini version of Android inside of the Google app.
Yes, it is. They haven't have the navigation bar down here.
Yeah, they have the nav bar and the overview and everything.
Yeah, you click the recent icon that, in my opinion, looks 10 times better than the current one on Android. You click it and it says no recent pages, like as you're on Android. It's well, you know this. I'm just describing this for whoever is listening. But yeah, it's cool that Google is pushing their material design to different platforms, and it works really well. At least on iOS. I don't know about Windows Phone. I think they don't give a crap about that. But at least here it's awesome. The Play newsstand, in my opinion, looks much better here than on Android. It's so much fluid.
Yeah, I think Google's been pushing material design farther recently too.
Yes.
Like the YouTube gaming app, for instance, is innovative in ways that really add to the experience and add to material design. Like they aren't just using standard approaches to things, which is good. And I hope we see more of that.
Yes.
From everybody.
Yes, that's what we were talking a couple minutes ago. Even if material design is so similar, you can either build an app that's similar to another 1000, or you can build an app it uses elements that other apps uses, but you still have a differentiation. My English, sorry. There's a different way of presenting your content.
Yeah, I definitely think that if any two material design apps look the same, then it's not material design's fault.
I totally agree. Even with Focus, we have the horizontal scrolling on the main screen. I think that itself it's something different that we haven't seen in other places. You can have so much content on this main screen and still have the different categories with the tags and your folders. You can see everything, and it's so easy to just scroll right and not lose your context. I think that's a big win for me. One of the best features of Focus, even if some users don't like it. I don't know why. It's a big feature.
Yeah, I agree. You're seeing literally every image on your entire device.
Yes.
At once.
Yes.
With performance.
Yes, it's so smooth. I'm scrolling on my Galaxy Nexus, which is the worst device ever, and it's like 60 frames per second, scrolling right or left, horizontally.
I think that's probably the most impressive development accomplishment on Focus from my eyes.
Yes.
Because I have no idea how to accomplish that. So it does seem like magic to me. Totally.
I'm a wizard.
Definitely.
Yes, it's a major win, and I think one of my now that we are almost wrapping up, I think one of my favorite ways of programming Android apps is trying not to lose the current context when you're presenting your UI. That's why I try not so much with Focus because there's no need to, but on my other apps I try to use dialogues a lot instead of moving the user to other activities, because when you click something and you go to another screen, you lose the context, and I hate losing context of where I am, because that's how I like it. So I try to give that to my users, and they can do everything almost without leaving the screen when you're on. And that's how what I love so much about Focus is I can scroll right or left, and I'm just here. I don't leave it, and I love it. And I'm scrolling right now while I'm speaking. It's like amazing. I know we made it together, but it's amazing.
So it has the fidget factor, you think? Where you could just sit there and scroll back and forth.
Yes.
Endlessly.
It's smooth. Now that the thumbnails are cached, so it's instantly showing everything, and it's like wow. And yes, I'm selling my product. Suck it up. I think we covered everything.
So yeah, I think that's probably about it for now, for this episode anyway.
I think so. I think we covered everything we had on our list, and it's been lots of fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure that we will do more episodes. Maybe not all about Focus.
No.
About other projects, certainly.
Yes.
But this has been a fun one.
Yes, very fun. And I guess invite me back or I won't pay you.
All right.
Bye bye.